So for those of you who are currently enlisted, or you did your bid in the military, or you're taking it very seriously of enlisting into the military, you would know that you need to take an ASVAB test. Now the ASVAB test is something like you have to take. Like there's no way around this. Do not pass go, do not collect $200 if you don't do that ASVAB test, because a lot of what you're going to be doing in the military, it lies within that test. That's how you get your job and everything. Although they focus more on your line scores, that's something completely different. But you have to score a minimum of 32. I think it's 32 for the Army in order to join into the military. That's your passing, your minimum passing. I did not do good on my ASVAB test. Like I did not, I don't want to say I didn't take it seriously, but I like kind of panicked because my test had timed out twice and I'm writing. Well, you know what? Let's just get into this video. We're going to check out Jody with a Y and see what he has to say about the ASVAB test. So he's in the Air Force or retired from the Air Force. So let's see what he has to say about this.
Way to go about taking this test, and I'm about to break it all the way down for you. But first, I want to talk about the worst ASVAB score I've seen. I had a girl who was about to graduate high school. For her senior project, they were supposed to make something about the career they were going into. She chose to make a video documenting her process of joining the Air Force. Y'all, she went all the way in. She scheduled an interview with me. She brought cameras. She brought microphones. She documented the entire enlistment process. She turned it into her teacher, and she got 100 on this project. But
Sweet.
y'all, it
That's
was so
clever.
sad because when it was actually time for her to join the Air Force and she needed to take the ASVAB, your girl only scored a 7. Now, here's the thing that
Now, she's trying to get into the Air Force. So I don't know how the Air Force goes, but I'm pretty sure the minimum is not a 7.
up for years, y'all. This was back in 2017. This has been bothering me since, and it's bothering me because I was always able to help people pass.
And she brought in a crew. But that is clever, though.
From 25 to the 50s,
very creative.
Studying with them for the ASVAB. But with her, I could not help this girl bump her scores up, and it was because I was helping her the wrong way. And I just figured this out. So if you are anything like her, then hopefully this video is going to help you. All right. So here's what nobody tells you about the ASVAB. It is not an intelligence test. It's not tracking that. It's not even testing your knowledge, really. The ASVAB is measuring something completely different. And once you understand what it's actually looking for, everything changes. Something that blew my mind when I became a recruiter is I learned that the ASVAB scores are not percentages. They're percentiles. So what that means is that if you score a 50, you didn't get half of the questions right. It means you perform better than 50% of a specific group. And that group is from 1997.
I scored a 33. So I scored 33% better than other people that were taking the test from 1997.
Not competing against other test takers in your room. You're competing against 18 to 23-year-olds from nearly 30 years ago in 1997.
Ridiculous.
But it gets deeper than that. This test is also weighted. So your math knowledge, your arithmetic reasoning, your word knowledge, your paragraph comprehension, all of those are weighted. The other things like your mechanics, your electrical stuff, none of that stuff counts towards your actual AFQT. I know you probably heard that before, but I just wanted to state it again. But when it comes to your AFQT, the score that actually matters, your verbal score gets doubled. That word knowledge and paragraph comprehension, that gets doubled. I'll break that down later in the video. But here's something that's gonna blow your mind. I asked 50 different recruiters, have y'all ever heard of this? Nobody knows. So all the recruiters telling you how to study all this stuff on the internet, people don't know how this scoring actually works, which is exactly why people have been studying the wrong way. And they're getting advice from people who really don't understand how this test works. But here's something even bigger. The ASVAB isn't really...
What I did, I went out and I bought that ASVAB for Dummies book. I did the little practices in there and everything, and I still did not score great. But then again, like I said, I panicked.
So let me break this down into 2 things the military is actually measuring with this test. So number 1, the ASVAB is figuring out, can you be trained? The military doesn't need you to already know everything. They're going to teach you everything once you join. What they need to know is, can you learn something when someone's teaching you? So can you take instructions and apply them? Can you recognize patterns? Can you adapt when something doesn't make sense the first time? That's what those word problems are actually testing. They're not testing you if you memorize the formula for calculating interest rates. They're testing, can you read a scenario, identify what's being asked, and figure out the right approach. The second thing they're measuring is how do you perform when the difficulty increases. So here's something most people don't know about the computerized ASVAB. They have the CAT ASVAB, that's the one that you take at MEPS. They also have the PICAT, that's the version of the ASVAB you can take at home. These do not work like a normal test.
I wish I would have did the PICAT. Like, I probably would have performed better, but I don't know. But I did read that with the PICAT, like, that is not your final score. Like, I think you still have to go in and test and still score, like, a right around the percentage that you scored on your PICAT, or else they'll know that you were cheating.
Adaptive. So if you get a question right, the next question is going to get harder. If you get one wrong, the next question is going to get easier. But here's what's really happening. The algorithm is trying to find the difficulty level where your accuracy starts to stabilize. So it's trying to estimate your ability, and that becomes your score. So think about it like this. When someone is prepared, they stay accurate even when the questions get harder. And so the algorithm is going to keep them at those higher difficulty level questions, which means you have a higher ability estimate, and that means you're going to get a higher score. When someone isn't prepared, their accuracy on those questions, it drops the moment the difficulty increases. So then the algorithm is going to naturally move you to easier questions, trying to find where you can maintain accuracy. And that is going to cap your score whatever level you demonstrate. And here's why this matters. The wrong answers on that computerized test, they do not subtract points from your score. They do something else. They push you towards those easier questions. And the easier questions are going to limit that ability level you can demonstrate, which also limits your final score. And then the second part is, can you make decisions without complete information? Now, this is a big one that nobody talks about. The ASVAB, especially the paper test, it doesn't penalize you for wrong answers. This is how it actually works. On the paper test, wrong answers give you 0 points. Blank answers also give you 0 points. So people think, what's the difference? Here's the difference. A blank answer has a 0% chance of being correct. You're never going to get any points from a blank answer. But a guess, even a random one, has about a 25% chance of you getting it right, which means if you're running...
I know one of the word problems, I spent too much time reading over it, and I was trying to just process what it was saying. I spent too much time on it. The freaking thing timed out, so that counted as a blank, and I was really disappointed.
Time and you got 10 questions left, you don't want to leave any of those blank. That's 0 points guaranteed. So what you want to do is you guess on all 10, and you probably get 2 out of 3 of them right.
I guessed on all of it. When she had told me that if it times out again, then the test is over for you, I just started clicking and guessing on anything. This is why I feel like, well, I know I scored so low, because I just started clicking. I didn't want that test running out anymore. I didn't want to take any chances. So it was a glance, and then I'm moving on to the next one.
Really telling you, we don't care if you guess. We care if you take action. And that's a military mindset. You don't always have to have all the intel. You don't always have to have the time to be 100% sure. But you still have to make a decision and move forward. Now, if you failed this test before, or you're about to take it for the first time, what I'm about to tell you is the difference between passing and maybe being stuck for another year if you feel like you're going to struggle with this test. So now that we know what the test actually measures, let's talk about how we can prepare differently. Because if you're studying like it's a school test, you're already kind of like 1 foot in the hole. So step 1, do not study all the different sections. There's 9 different sections. There's no reason for you to study all 9 of them. You got 4 sections that matter, like I said earlier: the math knowledge, the arithmetic reasoning, the paragraph comprehension, and the word knowledge. But remember earlier, I was telling you the verbal score, the word knowledge and paragraph comprehension, it gets doubled in the calculation. So what they do is they take your word knowledge, they take your paragraph comprehension, they plus them together. So if you score 50 in one, you score 50 in the other, they plus them, that's 100, and then they times it by 2. That's 200 points you receive. That's the biggest place where you can get points. So with that girl I told you all that made a 7, and like every other video I've made in the past, I told you all to focus on the math. And the reason why I said that is because I feel like that's the quickest stuff you can learn to go ahead and boost your scores up a little bit. But now that I found out
like,
that
not
your
even like
score weighs so much more than
joking
math,
or anything, but how is that possible?
Focus on the verbal section. That is where you study and get the most bang for your buck. Step 2 is you got to practice consistent decision making. And what that means is I want you to set a timer. Give yourself a minute or 2 minutes for every question, because remember, these sections are timed. And this is going to force you to answer the question even if you're not sure. But here's why this is key. It's because practicing this way, when you actually get into the testing room, you don't feel rushed because you've already been practicing like this consistently. Also, for these questions, I want you to practice eliminating similar answers. Like, for example, for vocabulary, don't just memorize definitions. You need to start practicing the elimination process. So you got to learn how to use context clues. You got to learn how to use root words. So when you're seeing these answers, you automatically know that 2 of the answers are going to be wrong, and you can eliminate those fast. And then the other 2, now you're just using context clues and using root words to try to single out the right answer. And step 3 is you need to understand the strategy for taking one of these computer tests. The first few questions in each section heavily influence your starting difficulty path. So if you nail the first 3 to 5 questions, the computer, it starts to put you on a higher difficulty track. It's going to say, hey, you're smart. You demonstrated a higher ability.
And I noticed that, like, as I went on, like, if I got something right, the next question would be harder. I did notice that when I was taking my ASVAB test.
Questions. The harder questions you see, the more you get them right, the higher your score. If you miss the first few questions, you're going to start to see all easy questions, and easy questions.
I noticed that also.
You're probably going to get a low score. And once you start seeing easy questions, it's significantly harder for you to start climbing back up to the harder questions. You're fighting an uphill battle at that point. So what I would recommend is spend some time on those first 5 questions so you can establish a high level. Don't just rush through them, even if you feel like they're easy. Make sure you get them right. That way the computer knows, okay, this person gets it. Let's keep feeding them harder questions. And step 4 is you all got to use the right tools. Since I started making ASVAB videos, I've gotten thousands of messages from people all over the world asking me how can they pass. And I got to be honest with you all. After years of helping people pass this test, I found one resource that consistently works better than everything else. And that's study.com. I've been partnered with them for the last 5 years.
I tried this too.
I've helped thousands of people through.
Study.com really is a good website. I did use them, and I did better on this than I did using the ASVAB for Dummies book.
Links, pass this damn test. And here's why it works. Their study material is built around practice questions. Of course they have lectures, of course they have breakdowns, but they have endless amounts of quizzes that force you to make those decisions under pressure. But they have endless amounts of quizzes for you to get familiar with what this test is going to give you. And then you can drill into specific areas like the word knowledge, like the paragraph comprehension, until you feel comfortable. Those repetitions are going to help you start recognizing patterns, and that pattern recognition is going to help you from unraveling when you're taking the real test. It also tracks your progress so you know exactly where you're improving. I get so many people after they finish taking this test, they hit me up and they say, I felt so ready, I felt so prepared, I just want to say thank you. And that confidence is everything. Look, my own son, he was struggling on the SAT before he graduated high school. And
I wish I would have seen this video before I took my ASVAB.
More than just ASVAB study material.
But
so when my kid's future is on the line, I'm not messing around with mediocre resources. I'm putting him on the same thing that I would put you on. And I got a link in the description with a 25% discount. So if you want to use them, feel free. But if you don't want to use them, make sure that you get something where you can study consistently and get you a lot of different practice questions. When you're ready to take the test, there's a couple secrets that you all need to know before you go into that room. Don't load up on sugar for breakfast. Your brain, it needs fuel for about 1.5 to 3 hours for this test. If you load up on donuts and energy drinks, you'll probably crash about
like how we used to do in school with those power donuts.
Clicking so you can hurry up and get through this test. You want to get something that's going to sustain you, something like eggs, maybe some peanut butter, oatmeal, Greek yogurt with berries and oats. Put the peanut butter on whole grain toast. You can throw some bananas on there, even some overnight oats. This is food that is going to sustain you to give you enough energy for the test. The only time you can take the paper test is out of high school. So if you're taking the test at your school, be prepared for that paper test. This is crucial. On the paper test, there's no penalty for answering wrong answers. Like I said earlier, you do not lose points, you just don't gain any. But if you happen to get one right because you guess right, that's just extra points. On the computer test, you can't leave anything blank. It won't let you go to the next question until you answer the one that you have in front of you. But on both
mine's
tests,
timed
time
out.
management is important. Secret number 3 is the bathroom strategy. You need to make sure you use the bathroom before you go into that room. Once you go into that room, they are not going to allow you to leave until that test is complete.
Real strict
Remember,
up in there.
Test,
Real
you
strict.
can finish that as fast as times you can finish it, but the paper test, you have to wait until that test is finished being administered. No matter how fast you move, you still have to wait for them to proctor the next section of that test. So use the bathroom before you go into the room. Secret number 4 is if you smoke or if you do nicotine, make sure you do that before you go into the room. You're not going to be able to do that once you go into the room. And secret number 5,
That stressed out, you gotta smoke a cigarette.
So when you're practicing, whether you're using study.com or whatever source you're using,
And then come back in the room where you have to sit with everybody smelling like that.
You're pissed off that you couldn't use a calculator and you haven't studied how to do it with pen and paper. So for that girl who couldn't join almost 10 years ago, I wish I had knew all of this before so we could have just focused on more verbal stuff instead of trying to shove math down her throat and she just wasn't ready for it. After you all finish taking the ASVAB, you have to go through MEPS for the physical part, and there's a lot of physical things that can stop you from being able.
So that is the ASVAB in a nutshell, and Jody with a Y gave some great insights, and I wish I would have seen this video before I went to MEPS and took my ASVAB test, but you know, it is what it is. It's already done. And with me, like, I had nervous, like I wanted to go and take it over again, but then I'm thinking, like, what if I go and take it again and I score lower? Because they don't take your highest score, they take your most recent score. And that was just something I did not want to take a risk at. But if any of you are currently enlisted or if you are a veteran, please drop some tips and advice down in the comments for anybody that is looking to enlist into the military, and give them some insights. And you guys can go check out Jody with the Y. I watch a lot of his content now that I am in the process of enlisting into the military. Even though he's Air Force, I still like to, check out his content. But I will see you guys in the next one, and I hope you learned a thing or two from this video. Peace.